mining, geography, and pioneering are intricately intertwined. And what was the character of the people that were involved in those early days? The immense capacity to take severe risk, a physical hardihood that we perhaps have forgotten what it is. The ability to live on the barest of resources while still pursuing some possibility of self-advancement. And in their heads at that time, it was not just looking for the nugget. That's a cheap shot. The idea was always present, as it was with this man Kennedy, that if he gets something that raises his station, it's part of something that will be an inheritance for his children or hers. There was always a driving impulse in the early Canadians, whether they cleared lands, whether they fished, or whether they mined, that they were building something. And successive generations of Canadians, most of them doing the hard toil, going to the hard places, taking the largest risks, and bearing the greatest labors. These are the people that have brought this country to the station that it is today. And here we are in full possession of that inheritance. And what's going on at the political level? How are we treating this? It is only a country so prosperous as our own that can afford to forget the original sources of that prosperity. It is only in a country as prosperous as our own that we get to the point where we denigrate and derogate the essential industries that brought us precisely to where we are. The source of social and political wealth begins in the primary resource sector. And unless you build on the primary resource, you have no country. But having advanced as far as we have lost the consciousness of how good we have it. And there's a whole movement across the country of playing down, of obstructing, of pushing aside, of complicating, of over-regulating, that's cut down the very industries that brought us here in the first place. I only have one joke. I'm going to share it with you. It's really, really funny. I have to tell you that because otherwise you won't recognize it. When Mr. Trudeau was still campaigning, he made one very solemn declaration. He made it several times. He said one of the reasons that he was in politics, and one of the reasons why we should have a new government, was that when he got in government, when he became Prime Minister, he was going to restore trust in the processes of the National Energy Board. He was going to restore trust in the processes of the National Energy Board. Now, I traveled the country a fair bit. I get back and forth all over the place. Prince George, Bonavista, Northern Ontario. And I remember I was in Twillingate a little bit after that, and there was a huge storm, wiped out most of the shore, most of the wharves. So I went to the little motel restaurant the next morning. Big disaster in Twillingate. So I went in. The old gentlemen were hovered around the thing, and one guy looks at the other guy and says, he says, I wonder when it's going to happen. When can I start again to trust the processes of the National Energy Board? And the next day I was over in Ontario somewhere, and you go to a coffee shop in the early morning, the old men are chatting it up. Some other big scandal occurred, but you walked in there, the first thing they were, I wonder, do you think we're going to get the processes of the National Energy Board back into our trust? I mean, where is this coming from? When you look at the province of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and you realize that in that particular location where we have another primary resource, that we have hearings that take 7 years. You had the Keystone XL that took 10 to 11 before Mr. Obama got around to saying no. You have pipelines canceled before they even begin. You can have a decade trying to get permission to do something. Can you possibly imagine what it would be like if in this day and age someone stood up somewhere and said, I want to build a railway across the country. They would be taken out and put in a hemp noose and invite Greenpeace to light the fire underneath them. I mean, even on small things. I'm sure most of you at one time or the other have had the chance to go to Banff. It's one of the great beauty spots of the world. And there's the Banff Springs Hotel, that great stone cathedral, right? I had my little nephew years ago when he was about 9. Took him out there and went up on the ski lift where you look around all the mountains, you're way up, and then you see down below, you see the great valley, the river running out in front of the Banff Springs Hotel, and something about it, the sublimity of the mountains, and then the picture of this, the river running in front, the lake that's there, and then this great stone castle, and the harmony between the hotel built by men in the century when you didn't have the machines we have, and the scenery was just too beautiful to believe. The injection of human spirit in a landscape completed the scene. Can you now imagine if you went to Banff Springs Park and you wanted to build something in this day and age? We have somehow become induced into thinking, at least our government has, that any initiative that unleashes the natural forces of the economy, that supplies people with work and jobs, that looses enterprise, that calls into play the forces of technology and the advanced engineering techniques that we hold first in almost all the world. It's an amazing thing. Those things are looked upon as dangerous. Those things have to be delayed so long that they no longer happen at all. Why is there such insistent obstruction to the exploitation of the most basic resources that we have in this country that have brought us to the point that we are now one of the most favored countries on the very face of the earth?